A cycle ended, and new guides stepped forward. Extraterrestrial contact shifted from a few voices to a wider network ready to lead humanity into the unknown. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're watching from and what you believe about extraterrestrial contact. Every great movement eventually faces the moment when the torch must be passed. For years, a small group had carried the responsibility of holding steady contact with extraterrestrials, standing as the bridge between the unknown and humanity. They bore the weight of being both receivers and interpreters, not just of strange lights in the sky, but of impressions, dreams, and signals that stretched human understanding to its limits. At first, there was no thought of replacement. Those who began the journey believed they might carry it for life. They trained rigorously, endured nights of silence punctuated by flashes of impossible phenomena, and slowly built a foundation for others to follow. But time itself introduced the need for change. As the years passed, their mission grew too vast for only a few to carry. New voices would need to rise. This realization did not come as a sudden shock. It unfolded gradually. The pioneers began to notice that during gatherings, others were also receiving impressions, clear, consistent, and often identical to their own. The extraterrestrials seemed to be widening the channel, no longer sending signals only through one or two, but through many. The preparation had matured to the point where contact could spread across a network instead of depending on a single point of reception. By 2010, the signs of transition were unmistakable. Some of the original figures stepped back, not in retreat, but in recognition that their phase was complete. They had carried the weight long enough. Now it was time to share the burden. New guides emerged, not randomly, but through years of quiet training, standing in the fields, enduring the pressure of silence, and proving they could remain calm when phenomena unfolded. These guides were not replacements. They were continuations, extensions of the same current flowing forward. The transition was not without fear. Some participants worried that the essence would be lost. Would the newcomers hold the same clarity? Could they resist the temptation to seek recognition instead of service? But those doubts began to fade as events unfolded. Lights appeared during gatherings, phenomena synchronized with group meditations, and the unmistakable presence of the visitors seemed to affirm the new phase. The sky itself was confirming what the community had already begun to accept. A cycle was ending, and a new one was beginning. The feeling that lingered after this realization was bittersweet. Gratitude for those who had carried the path until now, mixed with excitement for what the new generation would bring. Contact was no longer about a single thread of communication. It was becoming a web, resilient and expansive. Humanity was moving into its next stage of preparation. The rise of new guides transformed the structure of the gatherings. Instead of one or two central figures holding the connection, multiple individuals now led smaller circles. Each guide had been tested in their ability to remain composed during intense experiences. They knew how to steady a group when fear threatened to overwhelm it, how to encourage patience when nothing happened for hours, and how to compare impressions carefully so that truth could be distinguished from imagination. This decentralization was more than practical, it was symbolic. The extraterrestrials were showing that contact was not meant for a chosen few. It was intended for all who were ready. By training guides, the preparation could spread more widely, reaching hundreds, then thousands. The movement no longer depended on a single voice. It was now a chorus. The gatherings multiplied in different regions. Sometimes they occurred simultaneously, and astonishingly, groups reported the same phenomena at the same times. In 2013, for example, circles far apart described three lights forming a triangle in the sky, holding still for several minutes before vanishing in silence. None of the groups knew the others had seen the same thing until they later compared notes. For participants, this was undeniable confirmation. The visitors were orchestrating not just isolated events, but synchronized experiences across distance. And you? Have you ever witnessed something that felt larger than coincidence? Something that convinced you invisible hands were guiding events? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. These experiences gave the new guides confidence. Doubts about their ability to lead began to dissolve. Each event, each confirmation in the sky, reinforced that they were not alone in carrying the mission. The visitors were still present, still guiding, but now through a broader structure. By 2014, networks of guides had formed. One might oversee 5 or 7 others, who in turn guided their own small groups. In this way, the work expanded rapidly without losing coherence. Each person trained others not to depend on them, but to replicate the discipline and independence needed for contact. It was a living system, self-expanding, adaptive, and resilient. This phase also demanded humility. Some guides admitted struggling with the temptation of ego, of feeling important for leading others. But again, the sky answered. Lights would appear in moments of doubt, reminding them that leadership was not about power, it was about steadiness. The extraterrestrials seemed to emphasize again and again, the mission was collective, never personal. By the end of 2015, the transition was complete. The pioneers had stepped aside with dignity, their legacy intact. The new generation stood ready, not as replacements, but as proof that preparation had succeeded. Humanity was no longer fragile in its attempt to connect. It was resilient, multiplied, and growing stronger. The gatherings reflected this change. Instead of uncertainty, there was confidence. Instead of dependency on a central figure, there was unity in diversity. Each guide brought their own strengths, but all shared the same discipline, patience, calmness, and readiness. Contact was no longer an idea whispered among a few. It had become a movement lived by many. For participants, the symbolism was clear. Humanity itself was stepping into adulthood. Just as a child eventually learns to walk without holding a parent's hand, the community had learned to hold steady without depending on a few central figures. The extraterrestrials had watched the process unfold and responded in kind, offering confirmations that strengthened trust at each stage. The cycle had turned, and with it, a new chapter opened. Those who had carried the mission from the beginning were not forgotten. They were honored as the ones who had broken the ground. But the future belonged to those willing to continue, multiply, and expand. The message that echoed through the gatherings was simple yet profound: this is not the end. It is only the beginning. If this story caught your attention, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with those who are also fascinated by UFOs. And leave your thoughts in the comments. What do you think really happened?